Aaron, welcome to Seeking Alpha. Really happy to have you on the show. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So catch listeners up on those not familiar with Greenlane. Talk to us about where you play, what you do. Go for it.
Sure. So Greenlane is a leading provider of ancillary cannabis products globally. The best way to kind of describe it to listeners is Greenlane touches everything but the plant, right? We have this arm's length relationship. So some of our key categories or key products include ancillary cannabis CPG products like rolling papers, pipes, cannabis appliances, things of that nature. Got you.
And talk to us about where you see the story going. We just, for those viewers that don't know, you just announced a pretty big merger with KushCo. I'd love for you to catch us up on that deal and kind of where you see yourselves growing into, because I think many people know that there was a vaping crisis, and kind of where you guys see yourself going from there.
Great, fantastic. So let's start with going back a couple of years to Greenlane's IPO on the NASDAQ under ticker GNLN. A big part of the reason why Greenlane took the steps to do an IPO, which was the first of its kind when we did it, was really because we saw consolidation likely to take place as the industry continues to mature. And Greenlane wanted to be at the forefront of that consolidation as the consolidator of choice among ancillary products companies in this space. And we had successfully completed a handful of acquisitions prior to the IPO and one after the IPO as well. But then, of course, we were hit with a number of different headwinds, some industry specific, others just like, macroeconomic perspective like COVID. And it really kind of took us a moment to take a step back and review the overall landscape and what's going on. So we took a bit of a break from the acquisition standpoint, the acquisition strategy during the pandemic to regroup, and we made some meaningful changes within Greenlane. But now that we have a lot more clarity and we can see how bright the future is, we've been a lot more engaged and active on the M&A front, which is why we not only acquired ICE, which is a leading brand partner that we had been distributing for many years and represents what's core to our brand strategy going forward, but also expanding on the distribution potential within the industry, which is why we announced the merger between Greenlane and KushCo. And while the two companies have a lot of similarities, they're actually remarkably quite different. Greenlane over the last 15 years has focused very heavily on selling direct to consumers via e-commerce properties that we own, as well as selling to the mom and pop retailers in the form of smoke shops across North America and Europe. KushCo, on the other hand, has focused their energy and efforts on supplying large-scale enterprise-level cannabis customers in the form of producers, extractors, and large MSOs. As we look to the future, while obviously direct-to-consumer and the independent retailers will maintain a meaningful position in the marketplace, there's a likelihood that a greater chance of revenues and the CPG products that we sell, will be sold in these MSOs as an example. We believe that is the future because this is where cannabis consumers are congregating to purchase their cannabis, and it's a logical progression for those MSOs to also carry CPG products. However, those MSOs have been so focused on selling cannabis because as much as they can get, they can sell. And those relationships have been very difficult to penetrate because they're very meaningful, very large-scale relationships, something that KushCo has done a remarkable job at. So this merger represents a phenomenal opportunity for us to cross-pollinate each other's customer bases and product lines. Similarly, KushCo has products that we now will have access to provide to our customer base. So it represents a very exciting opportunity overall.
So talk to us about how the deal came to be. Did you approach KushCo? Did they come to you? did you know that you wanted to approach KushCo, or did you feel like that's what you wanted, exactly what you described, that's what you wanted to highlight, address that, and kind of sought out a partner that would fulfill that, and that happened to be KushCo? Talk to us about kind of how that came to be.
So going back to some of my comments earlier about our intentions to be the consolidator of choice in the industry post-IPO, you know, what's very important for Greenlane is to maintain a high level of connectivity throughout the industry. So we maintain very high level relationships and friendly relationships with every possible cannabis company that we may want to be able to do some type of either traditional business interactions and even potential bolt-on acquisitions or even larger scale transformative mergers like the KushCo one. So just in general, we like to maintain very positive, well-connected relationships with as many folks in the industry as possible. And over the last couple of years, between Greenlane and KushCo, we've built a mutual respect for one another's organizations. Again, speaking to the fact that while we seem very similar on the surface, we're actually remarkably different. And when we started to initiate initial conversations, I frankly can't remember if it was them approaching us or us approaching them. But again, just maintaining that positive relationship, we collectively saw the opportunity to actually drive more revenue for our collective customers, which is one of the things that really started off the conversation and drive the decision to really want to do something. We see this not only as a benefit for the combined company, but really for driving additional revenues and profits to our customer base.
So how does it look in terms of going forward and being a part of this market as a combined entity? What do you feel like it's bringing to the marketplace in terms of investors' ability to kind of like, exactly as you're saying, to kind of capitalize on this CPG iteration in this next phase of cannabis growth? What do you feel like the place is in terms of, you know, non-plant touching, the place where you guys play in the ecosystem? How big does that get? Kind of where do you see it going? And in terms of investors playing that side, how much does it grow as the legalization picture develops? I don't want to get too far off the point of my question, but as kind of even, you know, as MSOs develop and uplist to senior exchanges, and as they start to develop more and more, where's the place of the ancillary companies within that?
Great. So a lot to digest in the question there. So let me do my best to try to answer what you were asking there. So a couple of great things here. So being an ancillary cannabis company and being a NASDAQ listed company, we've taken great care to maintain compliance with all applicable laws. And it's that arm's length nature between Greenlane and cannabis that has allowed us to list on a major US exchange, something that very few cannabis related companies can speak to. So that represents a tremendous opportunity for institutions and certain types of investors to access the cannabis industry in a way that they otherwise may not be able to because of the OTC or foreign exchange listings and kind of their own internal compliance and rules around that. So certainly opens the door up to an investment community that otherwise is not available. For the combined Greenlane and KushCo, with some of the comments that I just made, we have we have this innate ability to not only access the growing MSO landscape and legal cannabis markets through the large-scale MSOs and producers, which again, KushCo is focused very heavily on. But because of the multi-purpose nature, if you will, of our products, we have access also to all 50 states already as it is with our existing products. So we get the benefit of being able to build a very efficient infrastructure across state lines that other companies and other cannabis companies like MSOs or LPs have not been able to do because of the rules and the compliance around touching cannabis plant, right? Being directly involved with cannabis. So it allows us to build a very efficient, a very large organization And scale is very important and will be important going forward. We talked a lot about in some of the merger documents and publicly about even some of the cost synergies and being able, the power, the scale, the financial improvement that scale provides. So it's the combination of all of these things that I think makes this a very exciting endeavor. Again, going back to speaking about the customers and being able to drive more revenue to their stores is really some of the most exciting aspects of what we're building here. Going forward, again, brands are very important in the space and will be important in the space. You'll hear that more and more. And building cannabis brands, like true cannabis brands, it's very difficult because the state line nature and the rules and the restrictions around federal laws. But being able to build cannabis brands in the former ancillary products brands and nationwide and globally is something that we see as a unique asset that we have as an organization.
And talk to me, because you guys have pivoted a bit, right, from the vaping into where you are now. Well, first talk to me about how that was in terms of, as a company, was it a cohesive thought of where you guys wanted to go and that was agreed upon? Or was it discussed in kind of which direction you were looking to go?
So a couple of things had taken place. Prior to, or just post after going public, one of the main product lines that we carried was actually some nicotine products, closed system nicotine products. And Greenlane is very publicly talked about how we're very opportunistic in nature. We have this incredible ability to spot opportunities and trends in the marketplace very early on. And we actually spotted this early trend in the form of closed system nicotine products. And that became a very meaningful part of our company's product profile in 2017, 18, and 19. However, ancillary cannabis products were very much at our roots in who Greenlane was as an organization, dating back to 2005, when the very first product that we ever sold was the Volcano vaporizer. So in combination with some of the challenges and new regulations and scrutiny around the nicotine products, we decided to focus our energy and efforts on the ancillary cannabis products world. So that not only included vaping products, but a number of other categories such as functional glass, various ancillary cannabis appliances, accessories, things like that. Now, when the vaping-related lung illness, EVALI, started to take place and unfold, again, we were quite confident. We were watching the information come out live, like real time, and we were very confident that the products that would ultimately be linked to likely be the black market products, and a lot of the information and evidence really pointed to that, which speaks to the need for sensible regulation in the space. And again, speaks to Greenlane's very conservative approach to compliance and infrastructure. So things like age gate at dispensary level, we believe are very logical, very important steps that the industry must take, which again follows through onto why federal legalization is very, very important, because it's an incredibly difficult task or ask of the federal government to regulate an industry that it otherwise sees as illegal. So the time for change is now, and reform needs to take place.
So within that reform, I mean, there's obvious good things that are going to come from that reform. I would say chief among them, kind of the social equity component, and people don't have to be sitting in jail for something that other people are profiting from. All the absurd laws on the books. And then obviously, cannabis companies getting rid of onerous regulations that takes more money from them, like the 280E. But then there's also this other point of what happens with legalization, which it changes things for companies that have been doing business, as they've been doing business, it opens things up. And kind of what we were starting to talk about before is, the notion of when other cannabis companies get to uplist to a senior exchange, do you feel like they start taking more of the pie and change how you guys are approaching the cannabis landscape?
Well, I think the first mover advantage that Greenlane has is critically important. Even just talking with potential acquisition targets, we understand, how meaningful just having a major exchange listed equity means. I mean, it creates a level of trust among people, because it is certainly not an easy undertaking to be able to provide that level of compliance and infrastructure to get a major exchange like NASDAQ on board with what you're doing. I don't doubt that others will be able to eventually make it onto the space, especially as things continue to reform and laws continue to evolve. But I think having this leadership position will really provide for a meaningful trajectory forward for the combined Greenlane KushCo, which is yet another reason why we saw it valuable to do this merger, this transformative merger. Again, speaking to scale is very important. Being Greenlane, a standalone roughly 140 million revenue NASDAQ listed company, there aren't that many NASDAQ or major U.S. exchange companies with that type of revenue profile. Oftentimes, they're much larger. Because there is an inherent inefficiency with being a company of that size on a major U.S. exchange and being able to handle all of the rules and compliance. So the scale that is provided by the merger also gives us a unique asset to be able to continue to push forward with our consolidation strategy as a combined company.
So talk to us about this coming year and kind of like closing the deal. What's the company going to be? What's the company's name going to be known as? Who's the management? Are you staying on as CEO? Explain a little bit about what the deal is going to look like, and then kind of going forward in the next, let's say, 12 months, what you see going forward for the combined entity.
Sure. So as we've kind of publicly disclosed, Nick Kovacevic which is the current co-founder and CEO of KushCo, will be the CEO of what will remain Greenlane. We'll maintain the Greenlane and NASDAQ listing. Myself, I will move into a co-founder and president role. I have found over the last 15 years in the organization, I am most passionate about being hands-on within the organization and working with the employees, the vendors, and the customers, and something that I very much look forward to doing more of in my role as president. We've also named Mr. Bill Moat as our Chief Financial Officer. Other executives have not yet been publicly named, but we will be doing so in the very near term.
Okay, got it.
Obviously, the other question you asked is, what does the next 12 months look like? Post-merger, obviously a lot of work and time and energy will be spent on the integration activities, which is going to be a meaningful part of again, being able to capitalize on the synergies on both a cost and revenue perspective. So we've already started some high level kind of planning work already in preparation for our anticipated closing of the merger, which will likely take place sometime between late this quarter and early next quarter. But integration is the focus.
What do you feel like because there's this huge consolidation in the cannabis sector that's been going on, but certainly in the past couple of months, I would say we've seen a real re-energizing of these kind of big deals happening, Greenlane KushCo being one of them. How difficult is it, or what are the things that you feel like are the most important to pay attention to when coming together and combining, two companies for this kind of greater purpose?
I would say it starts with culture. Integrating the cultures between organizations is critically important. At the end of the day, it really comes down to people. We're doing business with people. We're interacting with people in the form of customers, vendors, employees, and there can sometimes be differences in cultures, and being able to combine those cultures in a very fluid way is critically important. Again, as long as we're keeping the employees and customers front of mind as we go through this process, I'm very confident that we will come out very successful.
And just kind of to your point about, you know, your role in the new entity, in the new combined entity, that you're going to be president, and talking about how that's getting back to something that you like. You know, we started the CEO interview series about a month ago, and in talking to some of the CEOs, I've noticed that one of the big kind of challenges of being a CEO is you're more and more removed from the company, right? You've like gotten to this place, but it's almost like you have very little hand or day-to-day kind of interaction with the machinations of the company. You know, you're dealing with a lot of the outer world things, how the company is seen, and those kinds of things. So it's interesting to hear you talk about how you're excited to kind of get to the president role. I'd love to hear your thoughts about being an executive and getting to kind of that top of the executive leadership position, and kind of how it is to manage the different roles and grow from kind of one position to the other. Is that a lot? Because, you know, in other words, is what is exciting to you about this kind of new role part of the role that you're doing also with joining these forces? In other words, would you feel like it's as exciting if you were president of Greenlane as opposed to being president of, you know, this combined entity?
Yeah, so I mean, look, to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, it's very exciting. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and I'll say the most important thing in the CEO role is balance. You know, balancing your time between communicating externally, much in the way that we're doing now. You know, balancing time, communicating with employees and customers and vendors. But there's no doubt that you do dedicate more time than you otherwise typically do, making sure that you're communicating externally, making sure that the world knows your story and all the exciting things that you're doing. I have been most passionate, and I very much enjoy these conversations, but it certainly does require the right amount of time, energy, to make sure you're communicating on a constant basis, time that otherwise gets pulled away from that internal work that I'm particularly passionate about. Looking at next generation and products and brands, and much like I was talking about before, being able to identify these very exciting opportunities and work with customers, employees, and vendors, and execute on this go-forward strategy, and really be able to deliver an exciting opportunity for everyone involved, both internally and externally. So I'm quite passionate about this company. I'm quite passionate about this industry, but I really do enjoy thoroughly working with people within the industry in a more intimate level and one-on-one, and being able to talk about these products and focus more energy and effort. So that's why I speak to the level of excitement. I know, you know, I won't speak directly for Nick, who will be the combined company's CEO. I know he feels similarly to the way that I do, but I know he's also very passionate about getting out and telling the world about all the exciting things that we're doing. So I think having the right balance is very important, not just in individual roles, but just what each person is doing. So I think Nick does a phenomenal job really getting out and communicating clearly to the world what we're doing, how exciting things are, and he also does a good job of managing his team. But you know, I look forward to kind of this new role as a combined company for each of us, and I know Nick does too as well.
So, well, first of all, how difficult do you think it is when combining entities, just kind of you know, understanding where the different who's going to play the different roles? Do you feel like a lot of deals fall apart just because of those issues?
I mean, if you look historically, I suppose that, you know, it's certainly a topic of conversation, something that's talked about early and often, and figured out very early in the process. I think, again, just speaking to you know, how we approached this particular transaction, as long as you're keeping what's best for the company, what's best for the employees, the customers, the vendors, and the go-forward company and all its shareholders in mind, front and center, and you really approach it with that as the priority, then I think everything else falls into place relatively well. And a lot of those potential conflicts or issues or concerns really don't arise. So we've all approached this with that mindset, and I feel very confident and comfortable that we are set up in a very good place to be successful because we approached it in that very thoughtful way.
And talk to us about kind of, you talk about your excitement. What's the one thing or a couple things that you're most excited about this year for you guys, and also in the industry in general? Like, what do you see coming down that has you kind of, wow, what are we going to do with this?
Sure. So, I mean, we've built phenomenal relationships with third-party vendors, and they have a lot of great, exciting things in their pipeline. And we're going to continue to work very closely with our third-party vendors. But I'm also very excited about our pipeline of Greenlane-owned brands. We've already launched a number of them. We recently acquired Ice, and we're just seeing some phenomenal things come out of our Greenlane brand. So it's a really exciting time. And to be able to have that brand ownership and see how explosive some of the growth of these products has been, it's just incredibly exciting. I mean, it's a monumental effort that goes in from a lot of people within our organization to make it all happen, and to see it come to fruition early in some of the numbers is just fantastic. So we're going to continue to execute on our vision to really grow our brand's profile, our owned brand's profile in a more meaningful way, while also continuing to be very consultative and partner with our third-party brands and continuing to build there. So the balance between those, but it's just really exciting. But I'm just so thrilled with the work that the team has come out with on the owned brand strategy, and being able to, in a combined company, take those products and our third-party products and launch them in these MSOs in a more meaningful way to drive more revenue to the combined company, to drive more revenue to our customers. I mean, just the whole thing gets me very excited.
Are there certain kinds of branded products that you guys are more focused on than others?
So we're very focused across a number of categories in general, but just to highlight a few, I mean, we recently acquired Ice, which is a premium silicone smoking accessories products. They are the leader in silicone smoking products. Very excited. I've been working with them for years. It was very exciting to bring the co-founders into the Greenlane tribe. Also, we partnered with cannabis entrepreneur Berner, which is behind Cookies, the Cookies line of cannabis, to launch our Vibes rolling papers just in the last 12 or 18 months or so here. And we've seen very tremendous early success. There are other brands, like Marley Natural. We partnered with the Keith Haring estate to launch Keith Haring Glass. So just trying to make sure that we're penetrating a number of different product categories overall, as opposed to just kind of like narrow. But overall, I think, Vibes as an example is just one of the most exciting ones because it's a very old industry. Rolling papers is a very legacy industry, and be able to come into that industry with a new brand and new products and do so in a very meaningful way and gain a lot of attention and penetration very quickly is quite remarkable.
And what do you think it is about that that's enabled them to grow the market share there for such an established part of the industry?
It's a combination of really the following that Berner has and what he stands for and his passion for cannabis, which coupled with our passion for cannabis is a very, very powerful message that we are communicating to the world. Thinking very carefully about, even though a rolling paper may seem like a very simple product where there's not much innovation, there actually is a lot that you can do in the materials. We just launched our all organic hemp rolling paper line, which we're very excited about. It's resonating very well. So being able to combine our just overall passion for cannabis, couple that with Berner's passion for cannabis, and come out with new, unique, and innovative products in an otherwise category that hasn't been innovated in a long time is probably all of the, a lot of the ingredients that make it happen. I liken it in some ways to kind of like the what Chobani yogurt did in the yogurt category, where it was just an old and legacy kind of trade and product. Yet Chobani was able to come in and do something different and unique and exciting, and really revitalized the yogurt category. It's similar to what we're doing here with Vibes.
When you were getting into the cannabis industry, did you know that you wanted to get into this part of the cannabis industry?
Which part? The ancillary cannabis products?
The ancillary part, yeah, the non-plant.
Yes, back in 2005, I came across my first ever ancillary cannabis product. It was a vaporizer, an open system vaporizer or herbal vaporizer. And prior to that point, I had never really experienced an herbal vaporizer before. And I fell in love right away. I mean, I was just completely, overwhelmed by the technology, and I thought it was so unique and so different and so special. I immediately said, how do I get involved with this? How do I do something here? This is going to be big. This is something that's interesting. I want to get involved at the ground level. So at the ripe age of 20, I set out to start a ancillary cannabis products company in the form of herbal vaporizers.
So you were part of the cannabis community, that you were kind of already in it, and then you were like, oh, this is the way I want to professionally get into it.
Indeed.
Very cool. And did that become Greenlane?
Over time it did, yes. I mean, our earlier name was known as Vape World, again, speaking to the fact that we were very focused on vapor initially. It was really where we got our roots. In 2016, when evaluating our opportunities in the industry, we realized that our core customer base of independent mom and pop retailers was filling their 2,000 SKU stores by calling on over 200 different vendors, which is just almost unheard of. So we said, you know what, this industry needs some vendor consolidation. So that was the moment where we changed from Vape World to Greenlane and really broke out into these other categories. So once upon a time where vapor was 100% of our total revenue, these days it's closer to 60 or 65, because we're growing our other product categories so meaningfully because just of the historical under-penetration that we've had since leading up to 2016. And you'll probably see more growth and more diversification come out of us in that regard, because we've been so vapor focused for so long. Although vapor is a very meaningful category and we anticipate continued growth, we just want to try to outpace that growth in these other categories because there's so much low-hanging fruit.
Was that diversification part of, or kind of a result of what was happening in that vaping crisis last year, a couple of years ago? Was that a result of that, or was that just a natural progression of growing a company and wanting to scale it in different ways?
Unrelated. It was a very natural progression. So again, this was 2016 that we said, you know what, we really need to break into these other primary product categories. So it was just a natural evolution of the organization that was once Vape World and transforming into Greenlane and really growing meaningfully these other product categories.
And let me ask you, did Greenlane spend time at the height of the vaping crisis trying to lobby the government and say, hey, this is so utterly ridiculous, you're causing like real harm just by not regulating us? Is there lobbying going on in that way?
Greenlane does not do any direct lobbying. We have donated to some organizations, but typically we are donating more often to like the human rights type projects, like the Last Prisoner Project. We are more focused on ending people being in prison for cannabis than really lobbying towards legalization. We think legalization is natural and it will take place. But seeing, individuals being incarcerated, some people serving life sentences, that really needs to change, and that's where our kind of that's where our dollars go more towards that side of the trade.
Agreed. As an entrepreneur, as a self-starter, what's one thing, or you can give a couple things, that you feel like really were salient in growing the company in the way that you wanted to grow? What was something that you maybe learned along the way that you felt like, okay, this is something that I need to kind of keep part of my management strategy?
Wow, that's a great question, and a big question. We could probably spend many hours on that question alone. So if I was going to try to distill it down into just a few things, I would say a couple of things. Make sure you surround yourself with great people. Make sure you focus very heavily on your customer and the customer experience. And I would also say, for anyone out there, any entrepreneur and in any industry, I am a very firm believer that we are all capable of absolutely incredible things, and you are only limited by your own imagination, grit, and will to get it done. So just never give up. Life throws plenty of challenges at you. It's always something. Life is never a straight line, but endeavor to persevere is the answer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like, to paraphrase Thomas Edison, he said something like, it would be amazing what we all could do if we just believed that we could do it. I feel like that's so much of what is limiting us is our own perception of the task at hand. So kind of talk to us about the future beyond this year as the industry keeps evolving. Do you see yourselves evolving more and more, like branching out into different parts of the industry, taking on different products? Do you feel like there's more consolidation in your future? What do you see going forward, kind of post 12 months from now?
Sure. I mean, we've made no secret about our strategy to continue to consolidate the industry. There's still a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. We've been very active with our M&A pipeline in recent months, so we do hope to announce more, at least bolt-on acquisitions in the near term. We'll continue to evaluate opportunities as they present themselves in the space, but we certainly have plenty of opportunity and work to do already before us. I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges that the organization has always faced. We're in a very fortunate position to be presented with a tremendous amount of opportunity on a very regular, very recurring basis. And we spend an awful lot of time deciding what we're not going to do as an organization because there are so many opportunities, and we want to make sure that we maintain focus as a key part of our go-forward strategy, so that we can be very excellent at executing.
What are some of the things that you wouldn't get into for that reason?
Well, again, going back to some of the comments I made earlier. Once upon a time, not that long ago, we were very heavily involved in nicotine products, which was a great opportunity at the time, and we very well could have continued on that path and continued to bolster and build on it. But we made a very challenging decision, and we said, you know what? We would rather focus on the things that we're most passionate about and believe and are the most strong and the strongest in. So the example of just being able to really divest away from the low margin nicotine sales to focus on the ancillary cannabis products is a very prime example of that.
Was there any resistance to that as in the company, to that pivot?
I mean, there's always, in any type of major decision, there is a healthy amount of conversation and debate that goes on. And as a publicly traded company, especially when you're talking about altering the course of a company that otherwise, at our peak, roughly 46% of our total revenue was nicotine products. So having very healthy debates and conversations, even at the board level on something like that is critical. So, I think there's a process. It's certainly not a decision that you make overnight. It's something that you very carefully evaluate. And ultimately, we locked arms with one another and said, this is the right thing for the company, and no looking back. Here we go.
And what does it take to kind of make that decision? I mean, I know that this is like a very specific question, but is it when the majority has decided, how do you make the decision when there's kind of a chorus of voices in the room?
So I think ultimately that is a primary role that a CEO plays, and really being able to deliver the vision throughout the company, which includes major decisions such as the one to really move away from the nicotine products. Again, it doesn't come without a tremendous amount of conversation at the executive level within the organization, and then at the board level above the organization. But ultimately, there's oftentimes opinions in a lot of different directions, and a CEO, one of a primary role of a CEO in an organization is being able to make some of those tough decisions.
Is there anything that you feel like is coming in the cannabis industry that you feel like either investors aren't paying enough attention to, or are paying too much attention to something else and don't see this coming? Do you feel like there's something that you see that investors should be aware of in the industry?
Well, I mean, I know consolidation is something that we've been talking about a lot, and I know there's more and more consolidation taking place. But the industry gets a lot of attention, particularly in the kind of LP category, the licensed producers, some of the MSOs. But I think ancillary cannabis is still a bit under the radar. So it's been a unique phenomenon that takes place. Again, perhaps it's the ancillary nature of that, or it's perhaps that a lot of the ancillary companies are for the most part, relatively small in size compared to their LP cousins, which is, again, we aim to change that by virtue of this merger. And there are a number of other meaningful companies these days, particularly on the hydroponic side. But I think, ancillary cannabis in general, and companies like Greenlane are a bit of hidden gems, if you will, at least from my biased perspective, of course.
And do you feel like, it's an interesting point you make, that the reason why, I mean, there's the obvious reason that it's not a cannabis company, that people aren't like, that you're not selling flower, so people are getting the companies that are selling the flower. But the size of it, the fact that people are wanting to put their money in something bigger. But I think what also gets lost is just the inherent advantages, which we've spoken about, which is, the uplisting and not being bogged down. I don't know if everybody listening knows how much cannabis companies are raked over the coals in terms of how much money they have to give back to the government just by the sheer fact that what they're dealing with is federally illegal. So you guys are circumventing that just by the sheer nature of not being plant touching. Was it ever your desire to get into the plant touching side in addition to the ancillary side?
It's certainly something that we continuously evaluate. It's certainly nothing that we would do prior to federal legalization or some type of meaningful change in the laws that would allow us to do that. Again, because we maintain very strict compliance with all applicable laws. So until such time that that changed, we would maintain our kind of position as an ancillary products only company. But something that we certainly evaluate, just in the context of, we're delivering a lot of products to these, smoke shops and dispensaries, and it's a very efficient equation when you're talking to dispensaries to be able to not only provide them with ancillary products, but their actual cannabis that they need to supply their store as well. So it's something that we'll certainly evaluate and continue to evaluate. But right now we're very focused on the ancillary products. There's, like I said earlier, still a huge amount of opportunity in front of us just in ancillary products. But we're not closing the door to some of those broader opportunities down the line as laws evolve and change.
And what are your thoughts on the packaging side of things? What kind of cool things are you seeing coming up? That's one of my favorite parts to look at. I am kind of a packaging geek. I love watching what they're coming out with because I think it's so much a part of, different iterations of growing in an industry, and it's cool to see how far they've progressed in terms of that.
Yeah, so I mean, we were very excited to acquire Pollen Gear a few years back, and the leader behind Pollen Gear has a long history of being able to create these very high-end, aesthetically pleasing and unique products in the form of Pollen Gear, as his latest and greatest example. But it's just the beginning. What we see in the future, as the packaging continues to evolve, not only is there, not only do we have unique and differentiated ASTM child-resistant packaging options, new ones to kind of stay ahead of the curve, but as we speak more and more in greater detail with some of the largest cannabis operators in the space, we're actually speaking about custom silhouettes, much in the same way that the shape of a Coca-Cola bottle is very iconic and recognizable. We've been working with these large-scale cannabis companies to create their own unique silhouette specific to them, and we believe that's where the next generation of packaging is going.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, we started with this topic of how everybody's talking about branding. I mean, that's a great example of how to brand something in a really cool and elegant way.
Indeed.
Yeah, cool. Well, this has been a great talk. It's great to catch up on the ancillary side of things. I myself am talking to many, plant touching companies, so it's nice to get the kind of CPG other side of this other part of the supply chain on the show and talk to you. And it's really exciting to be, have a front row seat to kind of these like big deals that are happening, and to see what's going to happen with Greenlane and KushCo in the coming year. I think is exciting, and exciting to see what you guys have coming down the lane. Anything you'd like to leave investors with before we go?
I just want to speak to just first and foremost, thank you again for having me. And also just how much opportunity and how exciting it is. Again, each individual company between Greenlane and KushCo is a leader in their own right. And the combination of the two companies really speaks to this incredible opportunity to deliver more value to customers. So I'm very excited about the future. I think that even though we've been in business for 15 years at Greenlane and 10 years at KushCo respectively, we're just getting started. So if you want to learn more specifics, of course, you can always visit us at GNLN.com, which is again also our NASDAQ ticker. And I'm sure we'll be catching up in the near future as more exciting things continue to unfold here at Greenlane.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, for cannabis investors that are paying more attention to the multi-state operators, the companies in the United States that have a presence in a number of states, I feel like I would liken this, if you guys were MSOs, to one of the top 4 MSOs combining entities. So to kind of use that parlance, I feel like exemplifies what a big deal it is that you guys announced. And I think it is an exciting time in the marketplace to see what happens with that. So Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and congrats on all the good news. And definitely hope to talk to you down the line and see what you guys have going on.
My pleasure.